The Songhai Empire, Africa's Age of Gold. Introduction. Imagine an empire so wealthy, scholars said its kings sat on golden thrones, an empire where books were as prized as gold, and where cavalry and canoes carried its power across deserts and rivers. Welcome to the Songhai Empire, West Africa's last great medieval empire, often hailed as the culmination of Africa's Age of Gold. This is a story of gold and glory, of mighty kings and learned scholars, of dramatic battles and ironic twists of fate. In this journey, we'll travel from the early trading kingdoms of West Africa to the rise and fall of Songhai, a tale as rich and layered as the gold-laden sands of the Sahara. Prepare for an informative and entertaining exploration of history, with a dash of dry humor and a touch of irony along the way. Before we delve into Songhai, we set the stage with the empires that came before, Ghana and Mali, whose legacies of wealth and culture Songhai would inherit and surpass. Then we'll witness how a small kingdom around the Niger River grew, under dynamic rulers like Sunni Ali and Askia the Great, into one of the largest empires in African history. We'll see how it flourished through trade in gold and salt, how it became a beacon of Islamic learning, and how internal strife and new weapons brought it crashing down. This isn't just a lecture on dates and names, it's a vibrant story of ambition, innovation, betrayal, and resilience. So, take a moment to travel back in time. The year is 1464, and a new king has just ascended the throne in the city of Gao, hungry to build an empire. The sands of the Sahara are crossed by camel caravans, heavy with salt and goods, headed south. The waters of the Niger River carry boats filled with grain, fish, and soldiers. Over the horizon, an age of gold and learning is about to reach its zenith and its final thunderous crescendo. This is the Songhai Empire. Chapter 1. West Africa's Golden Empires, Ghana and Mali. Long before Songhai's rise, West Africa had already enjoyed golden ages under earlier empires. Ancient Ghana, not to be confused with modern Ghana, was the first of these, thriving between roughly the 4th and 13th centuries. The Ghana Empire, also known as Ouagadougou, sat at the crossroads of trade, controlling the trans-Saharan gold trade that linked West Africa's gold fields with North Africa's markets. Arab traders of the time marveled at Ghana's wealth. In fact, Ghana's kings had a tight grip on gold. According to one account, the king kept all gold nuggets for himself and only allowed the people to trade in gold dust. Talk about wealth management. This policy ensured the king's monopoly on gold and maintained the metal's high value. Caravans laden with salt came down from Sahara oases like Tagaza and returned north with gold, ivory, and slaves, enriching Ghana's rulers. With this wealth, Ghana's capital at Kumbi Saleh grew into a thriving commercial center, where, as one chronicler described, the king held court surrounded by lavish gold decor. Even the royal guard dogs wore collars of gold. Ghana's dominance eventually waned in the 12th century due to internal strife and new rivals. But it had set the template. West Africa was a land of gold, and whoever controlled the trade routes grew rich and powerful. Next came the Mali Empire, rising in the 13th century from the ashes of Ghana's decline. Mali, founded by the legendary king Sundiata Keita, the hero of the Epic of Sundiata, expanded to encompass the former Ghana territories and more. Mali reached its zenith under Mansa Musa, 1312-1337, a name now synonymous with unimaginable wealth. Mansa Musa's fame in history largely comes from his pilgrimage to Mecca in 1324, where he spent and gifted so much gold that he caused a gold crash in the economies of Egypt and Arabia. Contemporary accounts report that Musa's caravan included hundreds of camels and thousands of attendants carrying tens of thousands of pounds of gold. In Cairo, he gave out so much gold that its value decreased for over a decade. Imagine a king so rich that he inadvertently triggers inflation abroad. That was Mansa Musa. European mapmakers even depicted him on maps. A famous Catalan atlas of 1375 shows an African king, Musa, enthroned, holding a huge gold coin, a visual shorthand for West Africa's wealth. Mali wasn't just rich, it was cultured. Cities like Timbuktu and Djenné, which Mali incorporated peacefully or by influence, became centers of trade and Islamic learning under Mali's rule. Musa brought back scholars and architects from his Hajj, commissioning splendid mosques and madrasas. By the 14th century, about 2/3 of the world's gold came from West Africa, much of it under Mali's control, fueling a vibrant trans-Saharan trade network. Despite its wealth, Mali too would decline. After Mansa Musa and a few strong successors, Mali saw a series of weaker rulers and internal disputes in the later 14th century. Its grip on outer provinces loosened. In 1433, Mali lost Timbuktu to Tuareg nomads, a sign that the empire's golden age was ending. Gao, a prosperous trading city on the Niger, had been under Mali's domination since the late 13th century, but seized the moment to break free. By the 1370s, Gao and its surrounding region, the nucleus of what would become Songhai, regained independence from Mali's weakening grasp. Mali's eclipse opened the door for a new power to rise in the Niger Bend. That rising power was Songhai. Ironically, Mali's legacy of gold and learning did not vanish with its decline. It simply passed eastward to Songhai. Songhai would take over Mali's role, controlling the same trade routes and cities, but building an even bigger empire. If Ghana was the land of gold and Mali its golden successor, Songhai would be the grand finale of Africa's Age of Gold. Bigger in territory, diverse in people, and rich beyond measure. But as we'll see, great wealth can attract great challenges, and Songhai's glittering age came with its own set of troubles and triumphs. Mansa Musa of Mali, depicted in the 1375 Catalan atlas, holding a gold coin to signify West Africa's abundant gold. His 1324 pilgrimage dispersed so much gold that it depressed its value for years. The fame of Mali's wealth set the stage for Songhai's own golden age. The Songhai people trace their roots to the bend of the Niger River, where fertile lands meet the Sahara's edge. Long before Songhai became an empire, a small kingdom had formed around Gao, a city by the Niger's banks. Ancient settlements in this region date back many centuries. By the 9th or 10th century CE, Gao was already a vibrant trading hub linking tropical Africa with North Africa. Several ethnic groups merged over time to form the Songhai identity. For example, the Soko people were early inhabitants who fished the Niger and built boats, while the Du farmers cultivated the rich soils and pastoralist clans roamed nearby. Over generations, these groups adopted a common language and culture, laying the foundation of what we call Songhai. According to local legends, recorded much later in Chronicles, the first ruling dynasty of Gao was the Zar dynasty. One legend in the 17th century, Tariq al-Sudan, claims the dynasty's founder, Zar al-Ayaman, came from Yemen and established himself at Kukia, an earlier Songhai center. How much of that is myth versus fact is uncertain, but it shows that Songhai's elites liked to connect their origins to broad, even trans-Saharan heritage. What we do know from archaeology is that by the 11th to 12th centuries, Gao had kings wealthy enough to be buried in tombs with Arabic inscriptions, calling themselves Malik, king. This indicates early conversion to Islam among the rulers, since Arabic writing and Muslim titles were used, even as traditional beliefs persisted alongside. Gao's rise did not go unnoticed. As mentioned, the Mali Empire expanded in the 13th century and conquered Gao around 1300. For about a century, Gao paid tribute to Mali. When the famous traveler Ibn Battuta visited Gao in 1353, it was still under Mali's rule. He noted it as a great town where people used cowries, shells, as currency, and described abundant rice, fish, and milk, evidence of a thriving economy. However, Mali's grip weakened later in the 14th century. Internal struggles in Mali and external pressures, like attacks from desert tribes, loosened control. By the 1370s, Gao effectively regained its independence. Mali could no longer hold it. The Songhai kings, also called Zhuo or Sunni in different sources, began rebuilding their own power. One early ruler credited with consolidating Songhai's independence was Sunni Suleiman Dama, likely late 14th, early 15th century, who even attacked Mali's neighboring provinces. Songhai's ruling family at this time, known as the Sunni dynasty, would soon produce the empire's first great expansionist. But before we get to him, note that Songhai's breakaway happened at an opportune moment. Mali had lost Timbuktu to the Tuareg in 1434, and several of Mali's vassals were rebelling. Songhai was poised to fill the vacuum. From their capital at Gao, the Songhai rulers looked west and saw lucrative trade cities, like Timbuktu, Jenne, that were under new, uncertain masters. The stage was set for a bold leader to transform Songhai from a kingdom into an empire. That leader would be Songhai Ali. But he didn't emerge out of nowhere. By the time Ali came to the throne in 1464, the groundwork for expansion had been laid by his predecessors, who secured Songhai's autonomy and control over the Niger River corridor. Gao, thanks to its location, controlled trade routes carrying gold, cola nuts, slaves and grain from the south, and salt, textiles and horses from the north. The Songhai domain was already growing wealthy from this trade, even while Mali was fading. It's likely the profits from commerce funded the military that Songhai Ali would soon use to carve out an empire. Thus, by mid-15th century, Songhai was an independent, Muslim-ruled kingdom with a mix of traditional African practices, a strategic location, and ambitious designs. It sat at the nexus of Sahelian trade, and its people were seasoned traders and warriors. All it needed was a push, and in 1464, that push arrived in the form of a new king, with a big vision and an even bigger personality. Enter Songhai Ali, the one they'd later call Ali Bear, Ali the Great. In 1464, Songhai Ali, also spelled Sunni Ali, became king of Songhai, and he wasted no time in pursuing glory. If this were a drama, Songhai Ali's entrance would be accompanied by the clanging of swords and the beat of war drums. A dynamic and controversial figure, Songhai Ali would be remembered as Songhai's great conqueror, and also, in some accounts, a tyrant. His reign marks the transformation of Songhai from a kingdom to a vast empire, largely through military might. Songhai Ali was a skilled warrior with an uncanny, tactical mind. Shortly after taking power, he set his sights on Timbuktu, the richest prize in the region. Timbuktu, with its wealth and famed scholars, had been taken over by Tuareg nomads after Mali's decline. In 1468, some sources say 1469, Timbuktu's local leader, desperate to shake off Tuareg control, invited Songhai Ali to help. Ali obliged, likely delighted at the excuse to seize the city. He marched in and captured Timbuktu. However, instead of a gentle liberation, he treated the city harshly. The Muslim scholars of Timbuktu had been loosely aligned with the Tuareg, or at least they didn't welcome a ruthless new master. Songhai Ali, who practiced a syncretic mix of Islam and traditional religion, distrusted the scholarly elite of Timbuktu, seeing them as disloyal. According to the Tariq al-Fatash, a chronicle written later, Ali entered Timbuktu and committed gross iniquity, plundering and killing those who resisted. One scholar, Akilu, reportedly fled the city with other scholars on 1,000 camels loaded with books to escape Ali's wrath. The Chronicles, penned by Timbuktu intellectuals under later dynasties, brand Ali a godless tyrant for his actions. This reputation would stick, although it's worth noting that these chroniclers were writing under the Askia rulers who replaced Ali's lineage and may have exaggerated Ali's cruelty for political reasons. Still, the conquest of Timbuktu was a turning point. Songhai now controlled one of the greatest commercial and cultural centers of Africa, instantly elevating its status and coffers. Next, Songhai Ali turned to Jenne, Jenne, another crucial city situated on the Niger's inland delta. Jenne was famous for its prosperity and for being a gateway to the gold and kola nut producers farther south. But Jenne would not fall as easily as Timbuktu. When Ali besieged the city around 1468, the people of Jenne resisted stubbornly. The siege dragged on and on. According to tradition, it lasted 7 years. Imagine the determination or desperation on both sides. Jenne's inhabitants holding out behind their walls, and Sonny Ali's army camped outside for years, refusing to give up. Eventually, starvation and exhaustion forced Jenne to surrender in 1473. When Sonny Ali rode victoriously into the city, he had achieved something Mali never did. He personally conquered Jenne. Legend says Ali fell in love with the Queen of Jenne, or a notable woman there, and took her as a wife, but she died not long after, a small human note in the midst of conquest. With Jenne and Timbuktu under his belt, Ali controlled the 2 jewels of the Niger. He also secured the salt mines of Tagaza in the desert, either in his reign or shortly after, ensuring he controlled both ends of the critical gold-salt trade. Sonny Ali was not done. He was a whirlwind of activity, fighting wars in all directions. He repelled the Mossi horsemen from the south who raided Mali's old territories. He subdued the Tuareg and Fulani in various regions, and expanded Songhai north into the desert and east into the Hausa lands. Notably, he built a river navy on the Niger. Knowing that the Niger was Songhai's lifeline, Ali organized a fleet of war canoes. He is even said to have attempted a grand engineering feat, digging a canal from the Niger to Walata, a far-off caravan town, to more directly connect trade routes. It sounds almost absurd. A canal hundreds of kilometers long through the Sahara. Predictably, that project had to be abandoned when a war drew his attention elsewhere, but it shows Ali's audacity. He literally tried to move rivers to expand his empire's reach. While being a ferocious warrior, Sonny Ali had to juggle a religiously divided populace. Many urban dwellers, like in Timbuktu and Gao, were Muslim, while many rural subjects followed traditional African religions. Ali himself, according to historical evidence, was nominally Muslim, but also deeply attached to traditional magic and religion. His mother was from a non-Muslim lineage. He reportedly consulted sorcerers and upheld old spiritual practices. To devout Muslim scholars, this was anathema, and it partly explains why they vilified him in writings. Yet by other accounts, Ali did fulfill some Islamic duties. He prayed and gave alms, trying to appear Muslim enough when needed. Walking this tightrope, Ali ruled as a pragmatist. He didn't force Islam on the rural folk, nor did he fully submit to the clerics' authority in towns. Instead, he kept power tightly in his own hands and demanded the loyalty of all, often by ruthless means. Despite his reputation for brutality in Chronicles, there's no denying Sonny Ali's achievements. Under his nearly 3-decade rule, Songhai surpassed the Mali Empire in size and might. He took a relatively small kingdom and forged an empire spanning roughly 1.4 million square kilometers at its peak, about the size of modern France and Spain combined. The empire stretched west to the ancient Ghanaian heartland, and east to the borders of the Hausa states, and from the Sahara in the north to the forests in the south. It became one of the largest empires in African history. Trade flourished under his watch because he secured all the major routes and cities. With Timbuktu, Jenne, and Gao as a triangle of commerce and knowledge, Songhai grew immensely wealthy. One chronicler noted that by controlling these trade hubs, Sonny Ali increased Songhai's wealth to even surpass that of Mali at its height. Perhaps as important as territory, Ali instilled in Songhai a strong military culture. It was said that under him everyone was a soldier, a slight exaggeration, but it points to how geared towards war and expansion the state had become. He kept the army constantly on campaign, which might be one reason for his relentless conquests. An army kept busy has less chance to rebel. He established garrisons in captured towns and used fear and awe to keep provinces in line. In a dryly humorous sense, one could say Ali's governance style was one part hero, one part villain. If you were a Songhai commoner, you might sleep safe under the protection of Ali's armies, but woe betide any who challenged his rule or harmed the empire's trade. The irony is that while Songhai Ali built the empire, his very approach sowed seeds of discontent among certain groups. The Muslim intelligentsia, especially in Timbuktu, never forgave him for his harshness. They would later celebrate his fall, and that fall came swiftly after his death. In late 1492, Songhai Ali died unexpectedly while returning from a campaign. Some say he drowned crossing the Niger River. Oral tradition whispers a more sinister end, that Ali was assassinated by his own nephew. We may never know the truth, but what is clear is that Ali's death unleashed a succession crisis. The throne passed to his son Sunni Baru, but Baru lacked his father's charisma and, crucially, was suspected of being not devout enough a Muslim by the influential clerics. That gave a certain ambitious general the opening he needed. In sum, Songhai Ali's era was Songhai's age of conquest and consolidation. He is remembered in Songhai oral epics as a magician king who could make himself invisible in battle, and in written history as a fierce warrior who brooked no opposition. He left Songhai the greatest it had ever been, but also hovering on the edge of internal discord. The empire had been held together by his force of personality. Without him, could it last? The answer would come in the form of the next ruler, a complete contrast to Ali, who would take Songhai to its cultural and administrative peak, inaugurating what many consider Songhai's golden age. With Songhai Ali gone, turmoil gripped the empire. Ali's son, Sunni Baru, ascended the throne in 1492, but his reign would last only about a year. Why so short? Enter Muhammad Ture, one of Songhai Ali's generals, and according to oral accounts, possibly Ali's nephew. Muhammad Ture challenged Baru in the name of Islam. He claimed that Baru was not a true Muslim, using the discontent of the Muslim community as leverage. In 1493, Muhammad Ture defeated Sunni Baru in battle, overthrowing the old Sunni dynasty. He took the title Askia, which would become the name of his new dynasty. Thus began the reign of Askia Muhammad Zaemov, often called Askia the Great. If Songhai Ali was a lion, Askia Muhammad was a fox, shrewd, systematic and pious. He respected the power of religion and intellect in a way Ali hadn't. One might say Askia found Songhai a kingdom of war and left it a kingdom of order, and yes, still war, but much better organized war. He spent his 35-year reign building the administrative and cultural infrastructure of the empire. This was Songhai's golden age of governance and learning, when the empire truly earned the title Age of Gold, not just for wealth, but for its flourishing of culture and Islam. First, Askia Muhammad reformed the government top to bottom. He centralized authority, yet smartly delegated power through a bureaucratic system. He divided the empire into provinces, each with its governor, often drawn from his family. Nepotism was sort of his thing. He created ministries, finance, justice, interior, agriculture, and even one for foreigners like the Tuareg and Moors. Essentially, he turned what had been a loosely administered conquest realm into a structured state. He appointed judges, qadis, to enforce Islamic law and tax collectors, to make sure revenue flowed to Gao's treasury. Under him, Songhai had a more regular system of taxation and justice than ever before. This was a man who thought in systems and institutions, not just swords and spears. Speaking of spears, Askia didn't neglect the military. He professionalized the army. Instead of relying on mass levies of farmers in wartime, like in Songhai Ali's days when essentially everyone fought, Askia maintained a standing army. Many soldiers were war captives turned into royal slaves who were fiercely loyal and could be sent on far-flung campaigns without concern for local ties. He kept the cavalry, infantry and navy canoe fleet in top shape and he made a famous observation comparing his forces to his predecessors. Unlike Sunni Ali, who had blurred the lines between civilians and warriors, Askia distinguished between the civilian and the army, having a dedicated corps of warriors. This not only improved military efficiency, but also probably civilian life. Farmers could farm while soldiers soldiered. But perhaps Askia Muhammad's most celebrated legacy was his patronage of Islamic scholarship and culture. Askia was a devout Muslim, certainly by the standards of Songhai rulers, and he made Islam the official religion of the elite. In 1497, he undertook a spectacular Hajj pilgrimage to Mecca, emulating Mansa Musa's legendary journey. While Askia didn't quite cause the economic stir that Musa did, his caravan was still formidable. Accounts from Cairo say he traveled with 500 cavalry and 1,000 infantry and carried 300,000 pieces of gold to spend. In Mecca, Askia Muhammad was acknowledged with an honorary title by the Sharif of Mecca as the Caliph of the Sudan, effectively an endorsement of his role as the champion of Islam in West Africa. He also brought back scholars and books. It's said that upon returning, Askia invited scholars from places like Egypt and Morocco to teach in Timbuktu. He greatly expanded the Sankore University and other centers of learning. Timbuktu during Askia's era experienced a revival. Some call it a renaissance of Islamic scholarship. Lawyers, astronomers, poets and theologians flocked to Songhai cities, enjoying royal patronage. Askia built schools and mosques. The University of Sankore flourished anew, and new mosques appeared in Gao and Timbuktu. He even showed interest in science. One chronicle notes that he sponsored astronomers and built observatories in Gao to observe the stars. Imagine in the early 1500s West African scholars charting astronomy under state support. It truly was a golden age of knowledge. Another policy of Askia's that deserves mention is his focus on economic standardization and improvement. Songhai's prosperity relied on commerce, so Askia took measures to facilitate trade. He standardized weights and measures across the empire. No more haggling over the size of a sack of gold dust. The Askia's government made sure a mina or mitkal, units of weight, meant the same in Gao as in Timbuktu. This greatly helped traders. He also set up an inspection system for markets. One source says he appointed an inspector for each major trading center to ensure rules were followed and taxes were collected fairly. Trade, of course, boomed. Gold-salt exchange continued to be the economic backbone. Gold came from the southern mines, Bambuk, Bure, Akan fields, and salt from Tagaza in the desert. Songhai sat perfectly in the middle, taxing and protecting the flow. Additionally, Songhai exported slaves, ivory, kola nuts, and ostrich feathers, and imported horses, copper, textiles, and luxury goods from North Africa and Europe. The Niger River remained the empire's commercial highway. Goods would be transferred from camel caravans to riverboats at places like Timbuktu to continue the journey to cities like Jenne. Askia reportedly also encouraged agriculture by building irrigation canals and dikes, following up on some projects started by Songhai Ali. All these efforts increased food production and trade volume, making Songhai exceedingly wealthy in his time. Culturally, the empire under Askia was a tapestry of many peoples, unified by administration and commerce. Songhai in the core, but also Mande, Fulani, Tuareg, Mossi, Hausa, and others lived within the borders. Askia's policy was generally one of inclusion, as long as loyalty and taxes were given. The empire's social structure was hierarchical, a nobility often of Songhai origin at top, free commoners of various ethnicities in the middle, and at the bottom enslaved people, often war captives, doing agricultural labor. One interesting aspect was clan professions. Many people belonged to castes or guilds, e.g. metalworkers, fishermen, traders, and these professions ran in families. For instance, the Tuareg and Moors handled much of the desert caravan work. The Wangara, Mande traders dealt in gold trade, etc. Askia's administration respected these traditional roles while overlaying a centralized system on top. Now, one of the most dramatic moments in Askia Muhammad's life was ironically not on the battlefield, but in his own court. Despite all his wisdom, Askia could not escape the common malady of monarchs: succession troubles. He had many children. According to one account, Askia Muhammad had 471 children from numerous wives and concubines. Yes, you heard that right. 471, a number so absurd one has to suspect some legendary inflation. Regardless, he had plenty of heirs, too many for harmony. As he aged into his 70s, Askia went blind. In 1528, one of his sons, impatient for power, revolted. This son, Askia Musa, with the help of a faction at court, deposed the old Askia Muhammad. In a scene that mixes tragedy and irony, the great emperor was dragged off and exiled to a small island in the Niger River, blind and in disgrace, by the very progeny he had nurtured. Askia Muhammad spent about 9 lonely years in exile while his squabbling sons fought over the throne. But the story doesn't quite end there. In 1537, one of his loyal sons, Askia Ismail, rescued him from exile and brought him back to Gao. The old Askia, nearly 94 years old, was allowed to symbolically hand over power to Ismail, declaring him emperor. Shortly after, in 1538, Askia Muhammad died and was buried in Gao. His tomb, the tomb of Askia, still stands today as a pyramid-like mud structure, a testament to the era's architectural style. Thus ended the life of the emperor who had given Songhai its golden age. Askia Muhammad's reign left an enduring imprint. He is remembered not only for expanding the empire's territory. He campaigned as far as the Hausa city-states in present-day Nigeria, bringing cities like Katsina and Kano into vassalage briefly, and asserting dominion over the Tuareg and Mali remnants, but also for solidifying the empire's internal workings. Law and learning were perhaps his greatest gifts to Songhai. One North African observer in his time would have seen Songhai as a well-governed, pious state, a partner in the broader Islamic world, quite a change from the rough reputation of Soni Ali. Timbuktu's scholars honored Askia in their chronicles for his piety and justice, a stark contrast to their scorn for Ali. However, the Golden Age had a darker side. Askia's later years saw court intrigue and bloodshed among his children. After he was deposed, the throne changed hands in quick succession. Askia Musa, the usurping son, ruled only a few years before being assassinated by his brothers. Then another son, then a nephew. It was a murky period of palace coups. Ultimately, one of Askia's sons, Askia Dawood, took power in 1549 and managed to rule for several decades till 1582, with relative stability. Askia Dawood's long reign is often seen as the last period of stability and prosperity, sometimes called a Silver Age after his father's Golden Age. He maintained the empire's wealth and patronized culture, though perhaps without the same vigor as Askia the Great. It's worth noting a bit of irony. While Askia Muhammad was alive, he had unified and strengthened Songhai. But his method of keeping power in the family, appointing sons to governorships and high posts, meant that after him, those same sons were at each other's throats. In trying to secure a lasting dynasty, Askia inadvertently sowed the seeds for civil strife. It seems even in a golden age, the glitter of power can blind rulers to future risks. In summary, Askia Muhammad III transformed the Songhai Empire into a sophisticated state. Under his rule, Songhai became larger, richer, and intellectually vibrant, truly an age of gold in terms of both economy and culture. He proved that an African empire could be as learned and administratively sound as any in the world at that time. But after his strong hand was gone, Songhai's fate would wobble. The stage was set for external forces to exploit the internal weakness that followed. Part 2, Chapter 5, Golden Age Culture and Economy in Songhai. Let's pause from the narratives of kings and wars to appreciate daily life and culture in Songhai's Golden Age, late 15th to 16th century. This was, after all, an age of gold, not just because of metal, but because of the flourishing of commerce, learning, and art. Songhai, at its peak, was a booming multicultural empire, and nowhere was this more evident than in its cities like Timbuktu, Gao, and Jenne. Timbuktu especially symbolized Songhai's cultural zenith. Already famous under Mali, Timbuktu reached new heights under Songhai's patronage. It was said that the most profitable commodity in Timbuktu was books. Scholars there collected books from across the Islamic world, and local scribes copied manuscripts for sale. During the 16th century, Timbuktu had perhaps 100 to 180 Quranic schools, and several major centers of learning, including the Sankore University, where teachings in theology, law, grammar, astronomy, and medicine took place. The city's population included Arabs, Berbers, Songhai, Mande, and even occasional Europeans, like visiting traders from Italy or Spain. It was a cosmopolitan hub. A contemporary observer, Leo Africanus, wrote that the scholars of Timbuktu were held in such esteem that people would pay gold for their handwritten books in science or religion, considering that a bigger status symbol than gold jewelry. In fact, one chronicle notes that a single manuscript dictionary was purchased for the price of 2 horses by a Songhai ruler. That anecdote shows the high value of knowledge in Songhai, literally equated with wealth. Owning a library in Timbuktu was a mark of prestige. We have remarkable records of Timbuktu's scholarly output. For example, the great scholar Ahmed Baba of Timbuktu wrote dozens of works and amassed a huge library. When Moroccan invaders later captured Timbuktu in 1591, they dragged Ahmed Baba to exile in Marrakesh. He bitterly complained that the invaders stole 1,600 of his books, the smallest library among his peers, implying his fellow scholars had even more. This gives a sense of the intellectual riches present. To this day, tens of thousands of these Timbuktu manuscripts survive, many still being studied. They cover not only religious subjects, but also scientific ones. There were texts on astronomy, mathematics, medicine, even commentaries on law and history. Songhai's golden age truly glitters in these pages of learned manuscripts, pages from Timbuktu manuscripts showing medieval astronomical diagrams and calculations. During Songhai's golden age, Timbuktu scholars produced and collected numerous works on science, law, and theology. Knowledge was so valued that Timbuktu became a thriving market for books, with manuscripts sometimes selling for more than their weight in gold. The economy of Songhai was the engine powering its grandeur. We know gold was central. The gold fields of Bambouk and Bouré, in what is now Guinea, Mali, and farther gold sources like Akan to the south provided a steady stream of the precious metal. Songhai's rulers taxed this trade at key points like Timbuktu and Gao, growing rich. On the flip side of the trade, salt was just as strategic. Salt, essential for human and animal health, came in giant slabs from Tagaza and other Saharan salt mines. The Tagaza mines were literally made of salt. Workers cut out bars of it that caravans carried south. A humorous but telling anecdote. In the Sahel, salt was sometimes traded weight for weight with gold, showing how precious it was. Songhai controlled Tagaza until the Moroccans later seized it, and thus controlled salt pricing. Other trade goods included slaves captured in wars or raids. Songhai, like its predecessors, exported enslaved people north and used them internally on farms. Ivory, elephant tusks from the southern forests, kola nuts, a caffeinated nut prized in the north, hides and leather and agricultural produce. In return, North African traders brought horses, which were like the tanks of that era, crucial for cavalry, fine cloth, beads, and yes, books and paper. The trade routes formed a vast network. From the Atlantic coast all the way to Cairo, you'd find goods that passed through Songhai. The empire's geography helped this economy. The Niger River was a natural highway. It connected inland cities. Goods from the desert would arrive at Timbuktu on camels, get reloaded into boats, float down to Jenne, get offloaded to go to forest regions, etc. Songhai even had a system to protect trade. The state protected caravans and rivercraft, and in exchange took customs duties. A guild of merchants called the Yulla formed partnerships to manage long-distance trade, working under the empire's guarantees of safety. In modern terms, Songhai provided trade security and infrastructure and reaped the rewards in taxes. One cannot talk about Songhai's culture without mentioning the blend of Islamic and traditional influences. Islam was strong in the cities among the elite. You had splendid mosques, such as the Jingarabur Mosque of Timbuktu, built earlier by Mansa Musa but maintained by Songhai, and the Great Mud Mosque of Jenne. Gao had the Tomb of Askia, which itself is shaped like a stepped pyramid, reflecting Sahelian mosque architecture, likely built by Askia Muhammad as either his tomb or a combined tomb-mosque complex. Yet outside the urban centers, many people held onto ancestral worship and local customs. These didn't disappear under Songhai, they coexisted. The empire's unity was more about loyalty to the state and economic interdependence than about forced cultural homogenization. This is a key point. Songhai's golden age was multicultural. For example, the city of Jenne was heavily Muslim and an intellectual center, but just upstream, the peoples of Messina, Fulani regions, might still follow their own syncretic practices. Songhai rulers, especially the Askias, promoted Islam, but generally did not force conversion on subjects. Askia Muhammad did undertake a jihad against the Mossi to the south, but after winning battles, he did not compel the Mossi to Islam. They continued largely with their beliefs, acknowledging Songhai overlordship in other ways. Art and language flourished in subtle ways. We have less record of visual arts, wood carving, etc. surely existed but not well documented, but we do have evidence of a rich oral literature. Griots, traditional bards, would sing of the exploits of Soni Ali or Askia in epic poems. Indeed, there is an epic of Askia Muhammad preserved in oral tradition to this day. Music and dance tied to both courtly ceremony and village life would have been vibrant. Drums, string instruments like the ngoni, etc. would be common. The use of Arabic in writing and scholarship was widespread among the learned, but the common people spoke Songhai language, also called Zama in some areas, as well as Fulani, Mande, etc., depending on the region. It was a linguistic mosaic. In the Golden Age, monumental architecture in the Sahelian style thrived. The mosques of Timbuktu and Jenne, with their iconic wooden buttresses, sticks poking out for scaffolding, got repairs and patronage. One enduring legacy in Gao is the Tomb of Askia, a mud brick pyramid 17 meters high, which bears testimony to the power and riches of the empire. It's essentially a royal mausoleum and mosque. That it still stands, a World Heritage Site today, is a testament to Songhai's material culture. And of course, we must mention again the manuscripts and learning as the crown jewel of Songhai's culture. During this time, libraries in Timbuktu had perhaps tens of thousands of manuscripts. Scholars corresponded with peers in Cairo and Fez. There was even a literary rivalry of sorts. Two famous Timbuktu chroniclers, Mahmud Kati, Tariq al-Fatash, and Abderrahman as-Sadi, Tariq al-Sudan, both writing in the 17th century but drawing on earlier sources, give us a lot of what we know about Songhai. They sometimes praise and sometimes critique the Songhai rulers, giving us a nuanced picture. In essence, the Songhai Empire's golden age offers an inspiring tableau. Camel caravans trudging through the Sahara with salt, canoes gliding along the Niger with goods and soldiers, markets buzzing in Gao, scholars debating theology in Timbuktu, and farmers planting rice along the riverbanks. It was a dynamic economy where wealth from commerce fueled intellectual and artistic pursuits. One could say that gold from the mines paid for the books in the universities, a literal conversion of material wealth into intellectual wealth. The Songhai elite understood that prosperity was not just in accumulating gold, but in fostering a civilization that would be remembered. Yet, even in this heyday, there were shadows on the horizon. After Askia Dawood's death in 1582, the stability of Songhai unraveled. The empire was still rich and proud, But internal divisions and a looming external threat would soon bring this golden age to a dramatic end. As we turn to Songhai's decline, keep in mind the image of all that scholarly wealth and economic might. It will make the fall of Songhai all the more poignant. Chapter 6. Decline and Fall. The Moroccan Invasion. Every golden age meets its sunset. For Songhai, the late 16th century brought a convergence of misfortunes that led to its collapse. The empire didn't fall due to lack of wealth or external trade. Ironically, it fell because of its wealth, which made it a target for hungry eyes from across the desert, and due to internal weakness from succession strife. After Askia Daoud died in 1582, some sources say 1583, Songhai was thrown into a succession crisis. Daoud had ruled 33 years, a period of relative calm, but he hadn't clearly ensured a smooth succession. A war of succession erupted among the Askia family. Over the next few years, intrigue and possibly civil conflict split the leadership. Eventually, by 1588, a certain Askia Ishak II emerged as the ruler. But this infighting had weakened Songhai's unity and military focus. Provinces might have been less coordinated, some loyalty might have wavered. Enter the Sultanate of Morocco to the north. Morocco, under Sultan Ahmad al-Mansur of the Saadi dynasty, had just gone through big events of its own. In 1578, Morocco had defeated a Portuguese army at the Battle of Alcácer Quibir, a victory that made al-Mansur a hero, but also nearly bankrupted his state. Al-Mansur earned the nickname Al-Dhahabi, the Golden, and had grand ambitions. He looked south and saw 1. The trans-Saharan trade routes, gold, salt, slaves, that were the lifeblood of empires like Songhai, and 2. An opportunity, given Songhai's recent turmoil, to capture those riches. Morocco's coffers were drained from war. Controlling West African gold sounded like the perfect solution. In 1590, Sultan al-Mansur made a fateful decision. He would invade Songhai. He dispatched a force of around 4,000 men under the command of Judah Pasha, a Spanish Muslim eunuch in his service. Now, 4,000 might sound small against an empire, but these troops had a secret weapon, gunpowder. They were equipped with arquebuses, early muskets, and cannons, including 8 English-made cannons purchased via English traders. Songhai, for all its might, had not significantly adopted firearms. Its army was still bows, spears, swords, and arrows, with armored cavalry and infantry. No one in West Africa had large gun armies at the time. It was the classic clash of medieval and early modern warfare. Judah Pasha's march across the Sahara was brutal. Hundreds of soldiers died en route due to thirst and desert conditions, but by early 1591 they reached Tagaza. The Moroccans easily seized Tagaza's salt mines. Songhai's outpost garrison there wisely fled, as they were no match for guns. Then Judah's forces moved towards the heart of Songhai. Imagine the news in Gao and Timbuktu. Reports of strange thunder weapons carried by a northern army, of salt mines lost without a fight. It must have been both baffling and alarming to Songhai's people. Askia Ishak II mustered the imperial army to meet the threat. Songhai's army was huge by any standard. Some estimates say around 30,000 infantry and 10,000 cavalry. They were seasoned warriors, fearless, and vastly outnumbering the invaders. But they had no firearms. The two forces met at a place called Tondabi, just north of Gao, in March 1591. The Battle of Tondabi proved that sometimes advanced tech trumps numbers. Facing the Moroccan gunfire, the Songhai army's initial tactics faltered. In a rather desperate and tragicomic move, the Songhai general reportedly drove a herd of cattle towards the Moroccan lines, hoping to cause chaos among the invaders. The Moroccans, however, fired their guns, startling the cattle into a wild stampede, which turned around and trampled right back through the Songhai ranks. It was a disaster. Taking advantage of the confusion, the Moroccan arquebusiers and cannon blasted away, and their smaller but disciplined force routed the large Songhai host. One can imagine the shock of Songhai's warriors. many likely encountering firearms for the first time, as smoke, noise, and iron projectiles shattered their formidable lines. It was the end of an era, the last great armored cavalry charges of the African Sahel, falling to early modern gunpowder. Askia Ishak II and remnants of his army fled. Judah Pasha marched on, sacking Gao, Timbuktu, and Jenne in succession. These ancient cities, which had stood relatively unscathed through centuries of African rule, were now plundered by a foreign invader. The great libraries, some were vandalized or looted, like Ahmed Baba's books. People were massacred or enslaved. The wealth of Songhai, accumulated gold, salt, precious goods, much of it fell into Moroccan hands. It was a cataclysm. Songhai, as a political entity, collapsed after the defeat at Tondibi, 1591. However, the story doesn't quite end with Morocco effortlessly absorbing Songhai. Here's an irony. Morocco found it could win the war but not rule the empire. Governing a territory the size of Songhai from across the Sahara proved impossible. The Moroccans set up a sort of occupation regime with a Pashalik governorate in Timbuktu and tried to control the Niger region to siphon its wealth. But local resistance, guerrilla warfare, and sheer distance made it untenable. The Moroccan Sultan soon faced diminishing returns. His garrisons held a few key points, but not much beyond. After the invasion, the once united empire splintered into dozens of smaller kingdoms and fiefdoms. Songhai's royal family and nobles fled south and east. One group of nobles went down to the Dendi region, in today's Niger, where they tried to keep a vestige of Songhai statehood alive. They established the Dendi kingdom, continuing the Askia line in a much reduced form. They and other local chiefs basically carried on resistance against the Moroccans. The Moroccans, known as Arma in the region, eventually intermarried and settled in some towns, but never expanded again. Within a few decades, the Arma commanders in the Niger Bend were virtually independent of Morocco, ruling a small territory around Timbuktu, the so-called Pashalik of Timbuktu, while the rest of the former empire existed in fragments. It's tragic to consider. The empire's wealth that drew the invaders ultimately did them little good. Al-Mansur got some treasure, yes, but couldn't hold the land. And Songhai's people suffered immensely, losing the stability and protection of an imperial system. The trans-Saharan trade itself gradually declined in the 1600s, partly because Atlantic trade routes, Europeans on the coasts of West Africa, were now drawing away the gold and slaves, and partly because the region was politically fractured and insecure after Songhai's fall. One could say the age of gold ended not with a whimper but a bang. The bang of Moroccan guns. It was a grim end to what had been a glittering epoch, yet the legacy of Songhai did not vanish overnight. Culturally, the people carried on. The scholars of Timbuktu continued to teach. Indeed, Ahmed Baba eventually returned to Timbuktu from exile and continued his work. The tomb of Askia still stands in Gao as a reminder of past glory. Oral traditions kept alive the memory of Sunni Ali and Askia the Great. And interestingly, the Askia dynasty in Dendi endured in some form for centuries. In fact, a descendant of the Askias was recognized as ruler in that area until the French colonial conquest in 1901 finally removed him. So the line of Songhai kings limped along, a ghost of its former self, far into modern times. In retrospect, the fall of Songhai in 1591 can be seen as a turning point in West African history. It marked the end of the great native empires era. Ghana, Mali, Songhai, all had risen and fallen. After Songhai, no single indigenous empire would dominate the Western Sudan on that scale again. Smaller kingdoms, such as the Bambara, the Fulani Jihad states, etc., took prominence in the 17th and 18th centuries. The Moroccan invasion demonstrated the impact of firearms and foreshadowed the increasing interference of outside forces in African affairs, whether from the north or eventually from Europeans. For an empire that had shone so brightly, the end seemed cruelly swift. But perhaps there's a lesson in it. Songhai's immense wealth and knowledge were its pride, yet they couldn't shield it from change. Technological change, gunpowder, and global economic shifts, new trade routes caught up with it. In a dramatic, ironic twist, the pursuit of gold that had built Songhai also attracted the conquest that destroyed it. Chapter 7. Aftermath and Legacy. The curtain fell on the Songhai Empire at the close of the 16th century, but its story didn't simply disappear. The lands that were once Songhai saw new powers and continued traditions, and the idea of Songhai lived on in memory and influence. Let's briefly explore the aftermath and why Songhai's legacy still matters. In the immediate aftermath, as we described, the region fragmented. Local Songhai nobles set up small successor states mainly along the Niger. The Dendi kingdom in present-day Niger was chief among these, effectively a relocation of Songhai's capital in exile. There, a Rump Askia dynasty ruled from the town of Lulami and later moved around, trying to rally forces to oust the Moroccans. They never succeeded in retaking the old heartland, but they kept autonomy in their zone. For generations, they proudly called themselves Askia and kept the flame of Songhai kingship, even as a decentralized mini-state. This Dendi kingdom, sometimes also called Songhai in local context, managed to survive until the dawn of the 20th century when European colonizers finally subdued it. It's quite astonishing. The French deposed the last Askia of Dendi in 1901, meaning a line that began with Askia Muhammad over 400 years earlier persisted, albeit in much reduced circumstances. That speaks to the resilience of the idea of Songhai kingship. Meanwhile, the Moroccan armor soldiers in Timbuktu and Gao eventually became a sort of new elite in those cities, but their ties to Morocco faded. They integrated with the local population, and their descendants are part of the cultural mosaic of northern Mali today. Their presence did introduce a stronger North African influence in some ways, for instance, some North African architectural styles perhaps, and possibly contributing to the spread of gunpowder weapons among West African armies subsequently. The collapse of central authority led to constant friction and conflict in the region. The once busy trade routes suffered as caravans became targets for raiders without a strong empire to police them. Timbuktu and Gao went through periods of decline. Timbuktu especially changed hands multiple times, Tuareg, Fulani, Bambara, etc. in later centuries, but remained a legendary city in the imagination of the world. European explorers in the 19th century were obsessed with reaching Timbuktu, largely because of its Golden Age reputation as a city of gold and knowledge. That fame was born in the Mali and Songhai era. Culturally, the intellectual legacy of Songhai endured. Timbuktu's manuscripts survived in private family collections, many hidden during wars, and today they are recognized as treasures of African heritage. The works of scholars like Ahmed Baba are studied as key texts in Islamic jurisprudence and history. The Chronicles, written a few decades after Songhai's fall, the Tarikh al-Fatash and Tarikh al-Sudan, remain crucial sources for historians, and they were part of a tradition of historiography that flourished because of the Songhai scholarly milieu. Linguistically, the Songhai language, or group of dialects, continued to be widely spoken, and still is today in parts of Mali, Niger, Benin, and Nigeria, a direct continuity from the empire that carried its name. Many place names and titles from Songhai times are still in use. For instance, local chiefs in some areas held titles like Fari or Khoi, which harken back to Songhai administrative titles. Architectural and religious influences also persist. The mud mosques of the Niger inland delta region, like the famous Djenné Mosque, rebuilt in 1907 in its current form but on the site of an older one, and the Sankore Mosque in Timbuktu, are on UNESCO's heritage list, and owe their origins or maintenance to the age of Songhai. Gao's Tomb of Askia, which we've mentioned a few times, is similarly a protected heritage site. It stands as a symbol, its very shape reminiscent of a Sahelian pyramid, of the fusion of Islamic and local architectural traditions championed by the Songhai elite. In collective memory, especially among the communities in Mali, Niger and Nigeria, Songhai is remembered as a time of greatness. Griots still sing epics about Sunni Ali and Askia. Many West African Muslims nostalgically recall the era when Timbuktu was a center of learning, attracting scholars from afar, or when a ruler like Askia could claim the title Caliph of Sudan. It's a source of pride, much like how people in the Middle East speak of Abbasid Baghdad, or in Europe of the Roman Empire, West Africans speak of Mali and Songhai. One interesting epilogue: the European colonial powers, when they conquered the Sahel in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, were quite aware of the region's rich history. French colonial administrators sometimes invoked the memory of Songhai. In a perverse irony, one French expedition in 1898 was even named the Mission Voulait Chanoine and aimed to conquer the areas of the former Songhai Dendi kingdom. It's chilling that the colonizers saw themselves almost as a new Judah Pasha coming to finish what Morocco started. Fortunately, that mission ended in scandal due to the commander's atrocities. Eventually, the French drew arbitrary borders that split the Songhai heartland between modern Mali and Niger. Today, the Songhai people are minorities in several countries, but they cherish their history. Modern historiography also gives Songhai its due. Scholars note that Songhai at its height was one of the largest states in the world of its time, and possibly the largest African empire by land area in history. It demonstrates the sophistication of pre-colonial African civilizations, with cities, universities, international trade, strong governance, and a professional military. This counters old, discredited notions that Africa had no history or high culture before Europeans. Clearly, Songhai and its predecessors prove otherwise in golden letters. To sum up the legacy, the Songhai Empire's story is one of remarkable achievements in a challenging environment. It stood on the shoulders of Ghana and Mali and then raised the bar higher. Its fall was dramatic, underscoring how rapidly things can change. A cautionary tale of how technological edges, guns versus arrows, and internal unity can determine the fate of nations. But the spirit of Songhai survived in its people and their cultural memory. Africa's age of gold did not simply vanish, it transformed and left behind golden threads woven into the fabric of West African identity. As we conclude our journey, picture this: a sunset over the Niger River in Gao, the muddy waters reflecting a golden hue. On the horizon stands the silhouette of the tomb of Askia. The empire that once thrived here is gone, but its contributions in wealth, knowledge, and culture continue to shine. The Songhai Empire reminds us that history is not just the story of rise and fall, but of what remains after the fall. In Songhai's case, what remained was a legacy of golden inspiration for generations to come. Conclusion: the saga of the Songhai Empire is a sweeping epic of ambition and innovation, glory and downfall. We've watched it rise from a modest river kingdom to a sprawling empire, fueled by gold and guided by great leaders. We've seen how Sunni Ali's conquests carved out an empire, and how Askia Muhammad's reforms gave it an enduring structure and a shining culture. We stood in the libraries of Timbuktu, where knowledge was as treasured as gold, and on the battlefields of Tondibi, where gunpowder trumped valor, marking the end of an era. Dramatic and engaging, the story of Songhai carries a few lessons wrapped in irony. One striking irony is that the empire's very success carried the seeds of its ruin. Its wealth made it a target for foreign invasion, and its proud traditions couldn't fend off the march of technology. It's almost a Shakespearean twist. The age of gold ended by the pursuit of gold from abroad, the scholarly capital of Timbuktu subdued by soldiers who likely could not read the books they scattered. History can have a wry sense of humor indeed. For history buffs, Songhai's tale is a treasure trove, connecting West Africa to global currents of the 15th and 16th centuries. For the general audience, it's eye-opening to realize that a place like Songhai had universities while some parts of Europe were still emerging from medievalism. That African kings led glittering pilgrimages across continents. That complex administrations and international trade thrived in sub-Saharan Africa long before colonial times. It shatters stereotypes and highlights Africa's role in world history. On a human level, one might imagine the people of Songhai, the trader in Gao counting cowrie shells after a lucrative caravan sale, the student in Timbuktu poring over a manuscript by lamplight, the farmer by the Niger tending his rice fields as the imperial army marches off to war, the griots singing of heroes at a market fair. Their lives were part of this grand tapestry. Empires come and go, but people remember. And so we remember Songhai. In closing, the Songhai Empire's story is both inspiring and cautionary. It inspires with the heights an African civilization reached: prosperity, learning, power, a true golden age. It cautions with how even the mightiest can fall if they do not adapt to changing times, or if unity dissolves. The Age of Gold in West Africa reminds us that history has its cycles. Gold can glitter, but it can also blind. Yet even after the glitter fades, the knowledge, art, and legacy remain, like gold dust sinking into a riverbed, waiting for later generations to rediscover and cherish. And rediscover it we have. The tale of Songhai has been retold today, so that the exploits of Sunni Ali, the wisdom of Askia the Great, the bustling streets of Timbuktu, and the tragedy of Tondibi live on in our collective memory. As we finish our journey, perhaps we carry a bit of Songhai's gold with us, not in our pockets, but in our enriched understanding of the past. The Songhai Empire, Africa's Age of Gold, may have fallen, but it will never be forgotten.